Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're going to look at a history of the world, but probably not the one you learned in school. We're going to completely recenter the map, and by doing that, well, we're going to recenter our whole understanding of the past, the present, and even the future. All right, let's start with a simple question, one that has a surprisingly complicated answer. Where is the center of the world? Seriously, think about it. How you answer that question says a whole lot about the version of history you've been taught. You know, for most of us, the history we learned in school kind of radiates out from the West, right? You've got the rise of Rome, the Renaissance, the Age of Exploration. It's all presented like that's the main engine of global progress. England, France, Spain, they're always at the center of the story. Okay, but what if we just flipped that map? What if, for most of human history, the real center of gravity, the real heart of the world, wasn't on the shores of the Atlantic at all? What if it was deep in Asia, at this incredible crossroads of civilization? I mean, when you start to see it that way, it changes everything. Yeah, for thousands and thousands of years, the real pulse of the world didn't beat in Europe. It beat right here, along the spine of Asia. This region wasn't some backwater, some periphery. It was the absolute core. And the contrast is just stark. I mean, get this. When a guy like Alexander the Great set out to conquer the world, he never even thought about going west. And why would he? There was nothing there. Ancient Europe had no major cities, no great culture, no prestige. The real prize, the place with all the legendary opportunity, was the fabulously wealthy East. And you had these cities, Merv, Ray, names we've mostly forgotten now. But they weren't just dusty little stops on a trade route. Oh no, they were these dazzling centers of civilization. Geographers back then called them things like the mother of the world, or the bridegroom of the earth. Just beautiful, right? Like pearls strung across the continent. So what connected all these incredible places? Well, we call them the Silk Roads, but honestly, that name barely scratches the surface. Think of them more like the arteries of the ancient world, with the lifeblood of civilization flowing right through them. And here's the most important thing to get. This was not just about trade, it was so much more. This was like the world's first information superhighway. I mean, sure, silk and spices were moving west, but so were giant religions like Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam. Technology, new ideas, languages, philosophies, even diseases. They all traveled along this network, connecting people thousands of miles apart in a way that had never happened before. But here's the thing about that kind of connection, it was a total double-edged sword. It could create unbelievable wealth and prosperity, and it could also unleash absolute, unimaginable destruction. And nobody supercharged this connection more than the Mongols. I mean, by the 13th century, they had created the largest land empire in history. A huge, secure zone where travel and trade could just explode like never before. It was kind of the first great age of globalization. So, under what they called the Mongol Peace, everything just moved. Goods, ideas, people, they all flowed freely across this massive empire. It was actually faster and safer to get from Europe to China then than at pretty much any other point in history. You had a truly interconnected world. But there was a terrifying downside to all that free movement. Those same routes that carried all that wealth and knowledge, they also became a perfect highway for something way, way deadlier. And this is the ultimate dark side of that connection. The Black Death. It starts out here, on the steppes of Central Asia, and then it just catches a ride. It travels along these super efficient trade networks with terrifying speed. Carried by merchants, by soldiers, it eventually hitches a ride on trading ships and slams into Europe, wiping out maybe half the population. It's just devastating. Okay, so if Europe was this historical backwater for so long, how in the world did it end up dominating the globe? Well, the answer, pretty ironically, is that it was completely obsessed with the East. You know, we call it the Age of Discovery, but that's a bit misleading. Columbus and all those other explorers, they weren't looking for a new world. They were desperately trying to find a backdoor to Asia. They wanted a new, faster, safer way to get to the immense riches of India and China. And when they basically stumbled upon the Americas, they found the key. And it wasn't gold, not really. It was silver. The conquest of the Americas gave them a practically endless supply of it. And with that silver, we're talking hundreds of tons shipped every single year. Europe could finally afford to buy a seat at the big kids' table of global trade. So you see, Europe's rise wasn't some isolated miracle. It was bankrolled by the wealth of the New World, which gave it the cash it needed to finally play in the big leagues with the powerhouse economies of the Old World. And that is when the world's center of gravity, for the very first time, started to shift westward. Okay, so let's fast forward to today, because what we're seeing right now over the last few decades is this slow, steady reawakening of this ancient network. That center of gravity, it's starting to shift back. Now, the commodities are different, of course. Instead of silk, you've got oil. Instead of spices, you've got natural gas. And instead of ideas traveling by word of mouth, they're zipping along as data in fiber optic cables. But the basic idea, the fundamental logic, it's exactly the same. A massive network connecting the resources of the East with the markets of the West. And you can see this happening all over the place. I mean, literally. They're laying down new steel arteries, oil and gas pipelines, right on top of the old caravan routes. You've got China locking in gas supplies on 30-year contracts and pouring billions into huge infrastructure projects, creating whole new corridors for trade. So why does any of this matter? Well, the big takeaway is this. The huge shifts in global power we're seeing today, the rise of China, the focus on Central Asia and the Middle East, this isn't something new. It's actually a return to a very, very old pattern. The heart of the world is starting to beat again right where it used to. So that leaves us with one last big thought. What if history isn't a straight line that just moves steadily west? What if it's more like a pendulum, swinging back and forth? Because if that's true, it means the world map isn't fixed at all. It's being redrawn right now, right in front of our eyes.